Chapter 213. Several people were stunned to hear that voice. Roxane's body instinctively stiffened at once. She knew Lucian too well. By listening to his voice alone, she could imagine his frosty expression at that moment. Moreover, Roxane did not know how to face the man behind her due to recent events. However, Lucian had already walked in front of them. Hugo noticed Lucian's keep gaze on Roxane. His expression changed immediately. Mr. Farwell, he did not know that Lucian had another woman apart from Aubrey. Nevertheless, suspicion began to creep into Hugo's mind. When he saw Lucian's attitude toward Roxane, Lucian's expression turned cold when he recalled the scene of Roxane clinking her glass with Hugo earlier. Mr. Reynolds, you should be careful. When flirting with women, you shouldn't approach those who already have children. As he spoke, Lucian threw Roxane a meaningful glance. A look of surprise flashed in Hugo's eyes as he heard the sarcastic remark, "Roxane has children already? I didn't see that coming at all." Roxane did not expect Lucian to suddenly bring up the matter in front of a stranger and still used it to provoke her. Her expression darkened like a storm. "Yes, I do have two children. However, it doesn't affect my life nor what kind of people I make friends with. Mr. Farwell, you don't have to worry about me." The surrounding temperature seemed to drop as Lucian turned his gaze to Hugo and his friends. Pursing his lips, he asked, "Are you sure you want to talk about this matter here?" They were very close to the dance floor. With their outstanding looks, they began to attract the crowd's attention. Noticing the curious glances from the onlookers, Roxane clenched her fists to suppress her rising anger. Supporting Madeline, she turned on her heel and strode out of the bar. Hugo subconsciously wanted to follow Roxane. Nevertheless, he stopped in his tracks upon seeing that Lucian was walking closely behind her. As the cold breeze blew against Roxane, she began to sober up. By the time she walked to the entrance of the bar, when Roxane was about to hail a taxi by the roadside, she heard clear footsteps from behind her. It was immediately followed by Lucian's commanding tone, "Let me take you girls home." Without looking back, Roxane turned down his offer. "Mr. Farwell, you don't have to do that. We can go home by taxi." Lucian's brows creased as he went straight for her jugular. "How long do you think you'll have to wait for a taxi in a place like this? Or are you willing to make Archie and Benny wait for your return?" Hearing that, Roxane froze. Roxane did not have time to explain to Lysa when she left the house earlier. Moreover, she did not know what Madeline had said to them. "Could Archie and Benny be waiting for me right now?" The stalemate lasted for a while, as there was not a single vacant taxi on the road. Instead, Madeline had fallen asleep. A car slowly stopped in front of Roxane. The passenger seat's window wound down to reveal Lucian's stern side profile. "Get in," Roxane furrowed her brows at his order. However, Madeline, who was standing beside her, shuddered in cold. Upon waking up, she saw a car in front of her and mistook it for a taxi. Without thinking, she opened the car door and settled inside. Madeline's behavior made Roxane stiffen in shock. The latter leaned over to ask Madeline to get out of the car. Nevertheless, Roxane saw that her best friend had already dozed off. After contemplating for a while, Roxane followed suit. Looking at Lucian in front of her, she said faintly, "Thank you, Mr. Farwell. I guess I'll owe you a favor now." Lucian frowned without replying to her. He instructed the driver to send them to Roxane's residence. In a deep voice, soon, the car moved slowly and began to drive toward the destination. Throughout the ride, the car was dead silent. Apart from occasional sounds of Madeline mumbling, the atmosphere inside the car was heavy. Chapter 214. When they arrived at the mansion, Lucian suddenly spoke up when Roxane was about to help Madeline get out of the car. "If you're worried about your children, Why would you go to a place like that? Roxanne could see Lucian's frosty expression through the rearview mirror. Pausing for a moment, she replied, Mr. Farwell, you made the bar sound like some kind of shady place. Weren't you there too? Unlike you, I was there for business. Miss Jarvis, you sure have many men accompanying you earlier, Lucian retorted. Roxanne could not help frowning at his jibe. At that moment, she also recalled the words Lucian had said to her at the bar. Miss Jarvis, since you already have 2 children, I advise you to clean up your act. Even if you don't care about your reputation, think about your boys. I wonder, what will they think if they knew their mother has been frequenting that kind of place while chatting up some random guys? Lucian added slyly. It was not the first time they had discussed such a topic. Roxanne did not know if it was because of the wine, but she could not suppress her anger at that moment. Mr. Farwell, don't you think you're being nosy by meddling in my private life? So, what if I've 2 children? I'm single right now. What's wrong with me having a drink or 2 with another man? We're all adults here, she retorted. Was Lucian's frown deepened when he sensed that Roxanne was on the verge of losing her temper. He wanted to retort but ended up saying nothing. Despite having 2 children, I can't argue the fact that Roxanne is a single woman right now. Given our current relationship, I'm not in a position to interfere with her private life either. Still, I get pissed seeing her with another man after. Staying silent for a few seconds, Lucian uttered, Are you planning to find a father for Archie and Benny in a place like that? Do you think you can find a reliable man there? Roxanne let out a chuckle. I'll only know if the man is reliable once we get to know each other. Of course, I can't find out if the man is reliable if you keep interrupting us as you did earlier. Mr. Farwell, if you single quotes Ray.so worried, why don't you introduce someone to me? Roxanne. A flash of anger passed through Lucian's eyes. Roxanne averted her gaze in disappointment. Mr. Farwell, since you don't plan to do that, you should mind your own business from now on. With that, she opened the car door and helped Madeline out of the car. Through the rearview mirror, Lucian saw that Roxanne was struggling to walk while supporting Madeline. Frowning, he got out of the car and wanted to give Roxanne a hand. Sensing Lucian's intention, Roxanne immediately turned sideways to avoid him. Looking at the man who was standing close to her, she said indifferently, Mr. Farwell, you're right to say that people should be careful while choosing a partner. I'm not interested in a married man. Since you already have a fiancé, you should keep your distance from me. Lucian's expression changed when he heard her remarks. Roxanne continued coldly, Mr. Farwell, if Miss Pearson and Estella misunderstand the situation, it might ruin the happy life in your family. I don't know how to make amends for that. According to Aubrey, Roxanne was the homewrecker 6 years ago, hence, she did not want to come between them again. Lucian's expression darkened like a raging storm when he saw her indifferent attitude. The atmosphere around him was filled with tension. Nevertheless, Roxanne helped Madeline inside as though she did not see his expression. Chapter 215. Roxanne did not know how to face Estella due to her unpleasant encounters with Lucian. She would even avoid talking about Estella whenever Archie and Benny brought her up. It did not take long for the 2 sensitive boys to notice Roxanne's strange attitude toward Estella. Even though they were not avoiding Estella in school, their attitude toward the latter had become colder. Estella hardly spoke since she had just learned to talk. She would only speak a few words when others brought up a topic that she was interested in. Estella's condition gradually returned to its original state when Archie and Benny did not take the initiative to talk to her. Furthermore, she had not seen Roxanne for a few days. Lucian was the only one who noticed the Jess and Estella. A few days ago, Lucian could still hear Estella speak up occasionally after bringing her home. Nevertheless, Estella had been unwilling to talk. For the past 2 days, Lucian was worried that Estella might suffer a relapse. However, the only person who could improve Estella's condition had made it clear that she wanted to keep her distance from Lucian. The man felt conflicted whenever he thought of Roxanne. After picking Estella up from school in the evening, Lucian wanted to guide her into speaking by following James' method. Essie, how are you doing in the last 2 days? Are you in a bad mood? That kind of one-sided conversation had been going on for several days. Nevertheless, Estella remained silent. Lucian thought it would be the same that day. Surprisingly, the moment he finished speaking, a sweet but pitiful voice sounded in the car. Pouting, Estella said dejectedly, "I didn't see." "What didn't you see?" Lucian probed, feeling confused. Estella mumbled, "Ms. Jarvis." Then, she carefully counted on her fingers before stretching out 4 fingers. "For days? I haven't seen Miss Jarvis for 4 days. It was Miss Lane who picked up Archie and Benny every day. Even though Miss Lane was also kind to me, I still miss Miss Jarvis dearly." Waves of emotions surged within Lucian, knowing fully well that Estella could not see Roxanne because the latter was avoiding him on purpose. Nevertheless, he did not know how to explain the situation to Estella. Lucian had not seen Roxanne since their argument when he sent her home from the bar that night. As Roxanne said, "The 2 of us are merely strangers right now." As that thought occurred to him, Lucian felt an inexplicable sense of displeasure deep down. After a while, he slowly broke out of his reverie. Seeing how sullen Estella was next to him, Lucian suddenly felt that something was amiss. "Wait, didn't she talk with me just now?" Realizing that, Lucian knitted his brows in amazement. As if nothing had happened, he tried to get Estella to talk again. "Essie, what did you just say? I didn't hear it earlier. Can you repeat it for me?" Estella simply kept her head low, revealing the round back of her head and her puffed cheeks. She turned a blind ear to his question. Despite the lack of response, Lucian patiently patted Estella's head before agreeing to guide her again. She turned a blind ear to his question. Despite the lack of response, Lucian patiently patted Estella's head before trying to guide her again. "You said Ms. Jarvis didn't pick up the boys from school. Then who was the one who fetched them these last 2 days?" Double quotes. As soon as he mentioned Roxanne, Estella slowly raised her head to look at him. Lucian's heart raced. He was expecting Estella to finally reply to him. Much to his surprise, Estella merely glanced at him before shaking her head silently. Then, she lowered her head again as if she refused to communicate with him. Chapter 216. Lucian furrowed his brows. He could not help thinking of Roxanne. How did she manage to make Essie speak gradually? He was at his wits' end while facing the same problem, noticing that Estella only seemed to respond to the mention of Roxanne's name. Lucian inquired again, "Essie, did you want to see Miss Jarvis that much?" Estella nodded vigorously and gazed at Lucian expectantly. She seemed to think that he had a way to let her meet Roxanne. When Lucian saw Estella's hopeful expression, his gaze darkened slightly. He silently averted his gaze. "She likes you very much, Essie. Maybe she's been busy with work lately, hence, she didn't have time to pick up the boys." "Don't worry." Not receiving the answer she had hoped for, Estella cast her eyes downward dejectedly. She nodded weakly in response. And no matter what Lucian said, Estella only responded by either nodding or shaking her head. She also fumbled around her bag for a notebook, intending to write down her reply for him. Only the mention of Roxanne could evoke a more noticeable reaction from Estella. The more Lucian tried to persuade her into talking, the more helpless he felt. A while later, Lucian could not hold himself back from asking Estella, "Can you tell me why you're willing to talk at Miss Jarvis' house? How did she teach you to speak up?" That question could not be answered with a nod nor a shake of the head. Estella frowned, feeling troubled. Estella became even more distraught at the thought of her time at Roxanne's house. "I want to stay with Miss Jarvis a little longer." Taking out a pen and paper, Lucian handed the items to Estella. "If you don't want to talk, you can write it down for me." Lucian did not want to let Estella stay silent for long. With his current relationship with Roxanne, he could not send Estella to her. Therefore, he wanted to see if he could learn from Roxanne's method. Accepting the pen and paper, Estella wrote slowly, "Archie and Benny will ignore me if I don't speak up." A surprised look flashed across Lucian's face when he read Estella's reply. So, the two boys are the reasons why Essie started speaking? At first, Lucian thought that Estella would only relax when she was around Roxanne, due to her affection for the woman. Therefore, Estella slowly began to talk. However, he never expected that Archie and Benny would play such big roles in improving Estella's condition. Arching his brows, Lucian asked, "Do you like Archie and Benny?" "Very much." Estella nodded firmly. In response, "Archie and Benny have been nice to me ever since our first meeting. They also protected me in kindergarten. With the two of them around, the other kids didn't dare to bully me anymore. I feel like a princess of kindergarten now." Estella's eyes gleamed. Whenever Lucian mentioned the two boys, he felt conflicted upon seeing Estella's hopeful expression. Still, it's easier to let Estella interact more with Archie and Benny than to send her to recover at Roxanne's house. Thinking of that, Lucian felt relieved. "Since you like Archie and Benny so much, you can ask Catalina to prepare more snacks before going to school in future. Then you can share with the boys," he suggested. Estella tilted her head, unable to comprehend Lucian's words for a moment. Stroking Estella's head, Lucian added, "You should be nice to Archie and Benny and play more with them since they have been treating you so kind. I have to treat Archie and Benny better so that they will play with me."